My son called me suddenly. "Where are you, Mom?" "I'm at your sister-in-law Sarah's birthday party." "Get out of there right now and take your grandson with you." "Why?" "Just do it." His voice sounded so urgent that I took the boy into my arms and ran for the door. The moment I got into the car, I saw something I would never have believed. But before I continue, check if you've already subscribed to the channel and share in the comments where you are watching us from. We would love to know how far our stories of vengeance travel. I was standing in my small kitchen in Boston while the aroma of herbed roast chicken spread throughout the house. For more than 30 years, every Sunday night, I go into the kitchen and prepare dinner for the entire family. This house has witnessed so many gatherings, so much laughter, and also tears. The doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I quickly wiped my hands on my worn apron and smiled when I heard the crystal-clear laughter of Ethan, my youngest grandson. The door flew open, and Robert's entire family entered like a small whirlwind. Ethan, who is barely 5 years old, ran straight toward me and hugged my legs, still holding a plastic dinosaur in his hand. "Grandma, what did you make yummy for me today?" he asked, looking up with those bright, big eyes. I bent down, stroked his curly hair, and felt something warm fill my chest. "Your grandma's roast chicken, the best in the world," I answered, giving him a wink. Marissa, my youngest daughter-in-law and Ethan's mother, entered right behind him with a box of homemade apple pie in her hand. She gave me a kiss on the cheek, and a soft scent of perfume floated in the air. "Do you need help with anything, Mom?" she asked immediately, with enthusiasm. Marissa is always like that. She never waits to be asked. She rolled up her sleeves and started cutting the vegetables for the salad, humming a pop song from the 90s. I watched her with pride. Marissa is not only a dedicated mother, but also a strong woman who always seeks to balance work and family. Robert, my younger son, came in last, with a smile as radiant as the sun. "Mom, the famous roast chicken again," he joked, and lifted Ethan onto his shoulders. The boys' laughter filled the entire room, lighting up the house. At 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang again. I looked at the wall clock and smiled to myself. Henry and Sarah, my older son and his wife, were as punctual as always. I opened the door, and Sarah walked in, beautiful, in an emerald silk dress, her hair up, and impeccable makeup. She handed me a bottle of expensive wine and said softly, "It's for you, Mom." I thanked her. Although I do not know why, her smile has always seemed a little distant to me, as if it were carefully calculated. Henry, my older son, was behind her and looked tired. He had wrinkles on his forehead and deep circles under his eyes after a week working for the humanitarian aid organization. He just nodded, sat down on the sofa, and rubbed his temples as if he wanted to ward off a headache. Dinner began. The entire family gathered around the old wooden table, a witness to so many memorable moments. The aroma of the roast chicken and herbs made everyone sigh with pleasure. Robert, as always, livened up the atmosphere. He spoke excitedly about his new business project, his voice full of enthusiasm. Then he turned to Marissa and said proudly, "Mom, Marissa is about to be promoted. Her boss does not stop praising her. He says he has never seen someone so dedicated." Marissa blushed and interrupted him. "Oh, stop it. It was just luck." I looked at her, full of pride. She was humble, but I knew how hard she had worked to achieve it. I looked at Sarah and noticed she had stopped using her fork. She placed it on the table with a smooth gesture, but loaded with intention. Her smile was still perfect, but her eyes were cold. "How impressive, Marissa," she said in a serene voice. "It must be very difficult to balance a career and take care of Ethan." Her words sounded like a compliment, but there was something sharp hidden in them, like an invisible needle. Marissa stayed still for a second, then smiled and replied, "Yes. Luckily, I have Mom and Robert who help me." I noticed her shoulders tensed a little, as if she was trying to hide her discomfort. The atmosphere at the table became a little tense. I quickly served a piece of chicken thigh to Ethan, hoping to break the awkward silence. "Eat a lot, son. That way you will grow up fast like your dinosaur," I said, winking at him. But Ethan, in his enthusiasm, dropped the piece of meat onto the floor. "Oh, sorry, Grandma," he exclaimed with a distressed face. Marissa immediately grabbed a napkin, knelt down to clean the floor, and comforted him. "It's nothing, my love. It was only a little." I smiled, touched by the girl's tenderness. But from the other side of the table, I heard a slight, almost imperceptible sound, a clicking of Sarah's tongue. She did not say anything. She just took a sip of wine. Her gaze stopped at the stain on the floor. Her gesture was subtle, but that look chilled me. It was not simple annoyance, but something deeper, colder. I tried to push that thought aside, telling myself that I was exaggerating. Maybe Sarah was just tired, or it was a passing moment. When dessert arrived, Marissa brought out her apple pie. Everyone at the table praised it. Robert ate 2 slices in a row and joked, "Mom, I only married Marissa for this apple pie." Henry, although quiet, nodded. "It's very good, Marissa." I looked at Sarah, hoping she would join in the atmosphere. "Eat another little piece. It's delicious." I invited her sincerely, but she refused with an impeccable smile. "No thanks, Mom. I have to watch my figure." Her words were soft, but I felt an invisible wall between us. At the end of dinner, Robert's family hugged me effusively before leaving. Ethan, with rosy cheeks, whispered in my ear, "Next week, you make roast chicken for me, okay, Grandma?" I let out a laugh and pinched his nose. "I promise you." Seeing him get into the car, I felt a simple joy fill my heart. But when I turned, I saw Henry and Sarah preparing to leave. Sarah gave me a light kiss on the cheek. Her smile was still perfect, although it did not reach her eyes. "Thanks for dinner, Mom," she said in a monotone voice. Henry just nodded, with a distant look. I was left watching them disappear through the gate, with a strange heaviness in my chest. When I was alone in the empty kitchen, I started tidying up. The dishes were piled up in the sink, and the aroma of herbs still floated in the air. But Sarah's words about balancing career and family kept echoing in my head. They would not go away, like a discordant note in the quiet melody of the night. I wondered if I was imagining the tension between my 2 daughters-in-law. The house was silent, but I felt that a storm was brewing deep down. On Monday morning, while I was watering the geraniums on the porch, the telephone rang. I went into the house, picked up the receiver, and Marissa's voice sounded on the other end, rushed and full of apologies. "Mom, I'm sorry to call so early," she began with a trembling voice. She told me about an unexpected job opportunity in Chicago, an important project that could give her a promotion. The trip would last almost a week, and Robert was busy with a large contract, constantly meeting with clients. "Mom, I know it is a bother, but could you please watch Ethan for a few days?" Marissa asked, almost begging. I heard the tension in every word, as if she was fighting not to feel like a bad mother. I smiled, even though I knew she could not see me. "Don't worry. Leave Ethan with me. Go to work calmly. I'll take care of everything here," I told her, trying to maintain a soft tone so she would not feel guilty. Marissa sighed with relief and thanked me over and over again before hanging up. I stood there looking out at the garden with a feeling of calm in my chest. Taking care of Ethan was never a burden for me. He is the light of my life, a valuable gift that I have always treasured. Less than an hour later, Marissa's car stopped in front of the gate. She got out with a small suitcase decorated with dinosaur drawings. Ethan ran toward me and hugged me tightly. "Grandma, am I going to stay with you all week?" he shouted with eyes full of excitement. Marissa smiled, but I noticed her eyes were red. She handed me a sheet with Ethan's detailed schedule, time to eat, time to sleep, the doctor's number, and a carefully written note. "Ethan is slightly allergic to peanuts. Don't forget, Mom." Finally, she asked me to read him the story, The Little Lost Dinosaur, every night before bed. "Mom, I owe you so much," she said in a trembling voice as she hugged me tightly. I patted her back, feeling the love and trust she had for me. When Marissa left, I took Ethan to the kitchen. "What do you want to do with me today?" I asked, winking at him. The boy clapped his hands and shouted, "Dinosaur cookies!" So we got to work. I took the flour, butter, and sugar out of the cabinet, while Ethan chose the dinosaur-shaped molds. The kitchen was soon filled with his laughter and the aroma of baked butter. Seeing him press the dough into the molds with his little fingers, I remembered the days when my sons and I also spent afternoons in this same kitchen. But that joy did not last long. A part of my heart was still unsettled by Sarah's cold look the night before, and I wondered if I was being too sensitive. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, while Ethan and I were coloring his dinosaur drawings on the porch, the house phone rang. I answered, and Sarah's voice sounded on the other end, sweet and cloying. "Hello, Mom. It's Sarah," she said with an almost melodious tone. "This weekend is my birthday. I'm having a small party at the house. You have to come celebrate with me." I smiled and told her I would go, but she continued, with a voice full of enthusiasm. "Oh, I heard Ethan is with you, right? Bring him too. My friends are dying to meet your grandson. He will be the star of the party." Her invitation chilled me. How did Sarah know Ethan was with me? Marissa had only just left him that morning, and I had not told anyone. A feeling of uneasiness ran through my body, but I pretended to be calm. "All right, the two of us will go," I replied before hanging up. I looked at Ethan, concentrated on coloring a triceratops, with his tongue sticking out from concentration. The joy of the afternoon dissipated a little, as if a cloud was covering the sun. I tried to shake off that feeling, telling myself that Sarah just wanted to be nice, that she was trying to integrate more into the family. But deep down, I could not forget the way she looked at me last night, or the clicking of her tongue when Ethan dropped a little food. It did not seem like a simple reaction. It was like a tiny crack in the surface of a perfect picture. That night, after reading The Little Lost Dinosaur to Ethan, I sat next to his bed and watched him sleep deeply. The dim lamplight cast a soft glow on his round face. His long eyelashes trembled with every breath. I stroked his hair tenderly, my heart full of love, but also with an anxiety I could not name. Sarah's insistence that Ethan had to attend the party kept going around in my head. Why was she putting so much emphasis on that? And why had her sweet voice chilled my blood? At midnight, a strange noise in the hallway woke me up. My heart leaped and began to beat strongly. I tiptoed, holding the broom handle as if it were an improvised weapon. But looking out, I only saw the neighbor's cat jumping nearby, its eyes shining under the moon. I let out a sigh and laughed at myself for being so suspicious. Even so, instead of going back to bed, I went into Ethan's room. The boy was still sleeping deeply, hugging his plastic dinosaur. I stayed there watching him, and a cold feeling of uneasiness ran through my chest. I adjusted his blanket and tried to convince myself that everything would be fine. That night I stayed awake, listening to the ticking of the old clock in the living room. Sleep did not come. The image of Sarah, with her melodious voice on the phone that afternoon, kept appearing in my mind. I sat up, with my bare feet on the cold floor, and went out onto the balcony, where my small garden rested under the silver light of the moon. The geranium pots remained motionless, as if they shared my worry. I took a deep breath, trying to sort out my thoughts. And then, as if a door to the past suddenly opened, an image from 4 years ago returned. It was Ethan's christening. Marissa, with her skillful hands, had made all the paper decorations, transforming my garden into a world of colors. There were ribbons, small hanging dinosaurs, and a beautiful cake that she herself finished decorating early in the morning. Everyone praised her, and I could not hide my pride. But I remember that in a corner of the garden, Sarah was standing with a glass of champagne, observing the decorations. It was not a look of admiration or joy, but something difficult to describe, as if she saw something that did not belong to her, something that made her feel out of place. That memory brought others with it, like pieces of a puzzle that began to fit together into a gloomy picture. I remembered an afternoon at the farmer's market in Boston when I took Ethan to buy pottery. The boy, with rosy cheeks, held my hand and jumped while talking to me non-stop about his dinosaur collection. We ran into Sarah and a friend of hers. I, smiling, said, "This is my grandson Ethan. Doesn't he look like Robert when he was little?" Sarah's friend bent down delighted and pinched his cheek. "Oh, how cute, just like his dad." But Sarah only smiled, a pale smile without warmth. "Yes, he is very cute," she said, and immediately took her friend's arm, saying in a neutral voice, "We have an appointment at the art gallery, let's go." I was left there, a little uncomfortable, telling myself that maybe she was in a hurry. But now that I think about it, the way she left, as if she wanted to escape that moment, left a heavy feeling in my chest. Then I remembered last Sunday's dinner, clearer than ever. When Robert boasted that Marissa was about to be promoted, Sarah had said, "You must have worked very hard." But suddenly, I realized that I had overlooked the second part of her sentence. "You are very lucky to have a husband as understanding as Robert, who always supports you in everything." At the time, I thought it was just a polite compliment. But now, in the darkness of the room, I understood that it was not a compliment. It was a veiled comparison, an invisible needle aimed at Henry, who was always immersed in his humanitarian aid work and barely had time for long dinners or unimportant conversations. I felt a knot in my chest, thinking about Henry, my older son, with his tired eyes and deep wrinkles on his forehead. Did Sarah perhaps envy the closeness of Robert's family? Another memory came back to me, like an icy stab. It was at Henry's birthday, 2 years ago. Marissa, with her usual attention to detail, gave him a hand-knitted wool scarf with every stitch made with care and warmth. Henry hugged his sister-in-law, excited, and said, "Thank you, it really means a lot." I saw how his eyes lit up, as if he had recovered a little joy. But Sarah, she gave her husband an expensive Swiss watch, shiny and perfect, just like her. That night, casually passing by their room, I heard Sarah's low but sharp voice. "You liked the scarf more than my gift, didn't you? The simple things with feeling always win." Her tone was not one of anger, but of bitterness, as if enduring a wound that no one saw. I left the balcony and went into Ethan's room. The boy was sleeping deeply, holding a plastic dinosaur tightly, smiling slightly in his dreams. I adjusted his blanket tenderly, feeling immense love, but also a growing concern. Those memories alone seemed like just small waves, fleeting and easy to forget, but now they joined together in an undertow, strong and terrifying. I began to understand that the tension between Sarah and Marissa was not simple envy between two daughters-in-law. It was a deep dissatisfaction, a feeling of being ignored, of being relegated, that Sarah had kept silent for a long time, and Ethan, with his innocent smile and the affection the whole family had for him, seemed to have inadvertently become the center of that frustration. I sat in the chair next to my grandson's bed, gripping the edge of the blanket. The uneasiness I had felt since Sarah's call that afternoon turned into true fear. I wondered if I was exaggerating, if the truth was making me too sensitive. But Sarah's eyes, her smile that did not reach her eyes, and that sweet but cold voice kept tormenting me. I looked at Ethan, his face calm in sleep, and I knew I could not risk it. Tomorrow, at Sarah's birthday party, I would not let the boy out of my sight for a second. The following afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror and carefully tied a small blue bow to Ethan's collar, which highlighted his best outfit. Seeing him in his white shirt and elegant pants, I could not help but smile. "You look like a little prince," I told him, gently pinching his cheek. Ethan smiled broadly and turned around to show me. I took his hand, led him to the car, and together we went to Sarah's birthday party in Beverly Hills. When the car stopped in front of Henry and Sarah's house, I almost felt overwhelmed. The house shone with lights, twinkling garlands hung all over the garden, mixed with the soft jazz played by a live band in one corner. The air smelled of gardenia, and the guests, elegantly dressed, were already beginning to gather. I squeezed Ethan's hand, feeling that the two of us were a little out of place amidst so much ostentation. My simple wool dress and my worn flat shoes seemed not to belong in that place. Sarah came out to the door to greet us, dazzling like a queen in her wine-red gown, and her hair up in a high bun that highlighted her slender neck. "Mom, what a joy that you came," she said with a radiant smile, although there was something forced in her expression. She looked down at Ethan, with bright eyes but without real warmth. "Oh, how handsome my nephew is today." She gently touched the boy's shoulder, but that gesture seemed artificial to me, as if she was playing a role that she herself did not believe in. Ethan just smiled shyly and clung closer to me. I walked in with Ethan, trying to remain calm, although my eyes did not stop observing. The party was just as I imagined one of Sarah's would be, elegant, perfect, and calculated. The crystal glasses sparkled on the table, the dishes looked like works of art, and the guests conversed with phrases as polished as they were empty. I felt like a stranger, clutching Ethan's hand tightly, fearing that if I let go, he would disappear among that crowd. About 15 minutes later, the old phone I had lent Ethan to play with started vibrating loudly. It was a video call from Marissa. "Mommy!" Ethan shouted, his face lit up with joy. He ran to a corner of the garden where there was a stone bench to talk to his mother. I stayed close, smiling as I listened to him enthusiastically tell his dinosaur stories. But then I felt a gaze. I turned and saw Sarah, who was talking with a group of friends, casting a fleeting glance toward Ethan. For an instant, when she thought no one was watching her, her smile faded and was replaced by a slight gesture of contempt, almost imperceptible. Then she returned to her perfect smile, as if nothing had happened. My heart began to beat faster. That was not the look of an affectionate aunt. It was the look of envy, of something deeper and more disturbing. I tried to calm down and called Ethan when he finished the call with his mother. "Grandma, Mommy says I have to be good with you," he said, squeezing my hand tightly. I stroked his hair, trying to smile, but inside I was uneasy. Then Sarah approached with a gleaming silver tray. On it, there was a glass of orange juice decorated with a slice and a small paper umbrella. "Ethan, I have something special for you," she said with a sweet voice. "Orange juice with honey. I prepared it myself." She bent down and offered him the glass with an expectant look, as if waiting for a reaction. Ethan, who had been happy, stopped suddenly. He looked at the glass, then shook his head, took a step back, and hid behind me. "Grandma, I don't want to drink it," he said in a low but firm voice. "It has a weird color." I looked at the glass. The juice was darker than usual, a little cloudy, not like normal juice. I thought that maybe it was because of the honey, but Ethan's refusal disconcerted me. In front of Sarah, I tried to encourage him. "It's tasty, son. Your Aunt Sarah prepared it for you." But the boy shook his head more strongly, almost about to cry. "No, I only want water." Sarah smiled, a patient smile, but one that failed to hide a certain tension at the corners of her eyes. It's okay," she said in a sweet voice. "You're probably still full. Then let me put it away, and later if you're thirsty, you can have it." She took the glass of juice and went into the house, moving gracefully as if nothing had happened. I sighed with relief and took Ethan to the water cooler in the corner of the garden. I poured him a glass. While I watched him drink in small sips, I told myself that perhaps I was exaggerating. But Sarah's look, that slight gesture of disdain, and her insistence with the orange juice kept giving me a bad feeling. The party was getting more and more lively. The jazz gave way to faster rhythms, and people started dancing. Ethan, with his eyes half closed from sleep, was clearly not having fun. He pulled my sleeve and whispered, "Grandma, let's go. I'm sleepy." I stroked his hair, also wishing to leave there as soon as possible. I looked around for Sarah to politely say goodbye, but Ethan pulled my hand harder. "Grandma, I want to go to the bathroom," he said with a demanding tone. I pointed to the end of the hallway that led into the house. "The bathroom is over there. Can you go by yourself?" Ethan nodded and ran off, still clutching his plastic dinosaur in his hand. I stood there, keeping my eyes on the hallway, counting the seconds until he returned. The decision not to lose sight of him became firmer than ever. But right at that moment, the phone inside my purse started vibrating loudly, as if warning me of something. I took it out and looked at the screen. It was Robert's number. A bad feeling ran through my body and my pulse quickened. I pushed my way through some guests and quickly went toward the back terrace, where there was an old iron table and almost no one was passing by. The fresh night air made me shiver, or perhaps it was the fear that was beginning to grow in my chest. "Hello, Robert? What's wrong, son?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, although my heart was pounding. On the other end, I did not hear the cheerful, energetic voice of my younger son. Instead, a series of broken sounds, covered by the whistling of the wind, as if Robert was somewhere desolate. "Mom, where are you?" His voice sounded broken, full of panic. I squeezed the phone tightly, feeling the ground opening up beneath my feet. "I'm at your sister-in-law Sarah's birthday party. Why are you calling? Did something happen?" I replied with a trembling voice, trying not to lose my calm. "Get out of there now!" Robert's scream was so sharp that I jumped, almost dropping the phone. "Take my son with you, right now!" And those words went through me like a knife. I felt my blood stop. My breathing was heavy. "Why? Robert, what's happening? Tell me what's going on!" I shouted, almost breathless, not stopping looking toward the hallway where Ethan was. "Ethan went to the bathroom." "Don't ask anything!" Robert interrupted me, his voice broken by fear. "Do it, Mom. Do it now. Henry just called me. The signal was very bad, but he said, 'Hurry, Mom. Find Ethan and go. Don't let anyone see you.'" Before I could say another word, the call suddenly cut off. Only the long, cold beep remained, like a sentence. I stood motionless, with the cold phone in my hand, feeling the life draining out of me. Henry? Why was Henry calling Robert? And why did Robert's voice sound so full of panic? Dispersed fragments of the last few days, Sarah's cold look, the slight gesture of contempt, the glass of orange juice with a strange color, were no longer just invisible needles. They joined together, forming an icy spear pointing straight at my chest. I felt short of breath, as if the air in the elegant garden had become toxic. The party, with its bright lights and false laughter, now seemed like a trap to me. I put the phone in my pocket without losing a second. My heart was pounding, about to burst. I ran toward the house. In my haste, I bumped into a waiter carrying a tray of glasses. The crystal glasses fell to the floor, exploding with a dry sound that mixed with the jazz coming from the garden. "Sorry," I murmured without looking back. The curious looks around me no longer mattered. Only Ethan. He was all that mattered. "Ethan?" I called him, trying to keep my voice steady, but panic was already filtering into every word. "Are you done, Ethan?" I pushed the bathroom door hard, but the room was empty. The toilet had just flushed. The faucet was still dripping, but there was no one. A wave of terror squeezed my chest. Where could he have gone if he had only just entered a few minutes ago? I turned. I ran toward the living room, scanning the place desperately. Unfamiliar faces, polite smiles, everything mixed like a blurry painting. I did not see the familiar curls, nor the small silhouette of my grandson anywhere. "Ethan! Ethan!" I shouted louder, no longer worrying about appearances. Some guests turned around, others whispered among themselves, but I did not care. I felt trapped in a nightmare, where everything moved in slow motion, except the fear that consumed me. A thought crossed my mind. The kitchen. Maybe Ethan was thirsty and went to look for the glass of water I had served him earlier. I ran toward the wooden saloon-style swinging doors, which led to the kitchen, and pushed them so hard that the hinges squeaked. Inside, the kitchen was much quieter than the hustle and bustle outside. Only the hum of the refrigerator could be heard, and the yellowish light illuminated dirty dishes and food scraps on the counter. I looked around, hoping to see Ethan there, maybe playing with his plastic dinosaur. But no, he was not there. And then I saw her. Sarah was standing with her back to me, next to the counter, in a corner of the kitchen. She was doing something with great concentration, as if the world did not exist. In her hands, she had a glass of orange juice with a small umbrella, the same glass that Ethan had refused. My heart stopped. I held my breath, hidden behind the ajar door, not daring to move. Through the gap, I saw how Sarah carefully opened a small, unlabeled glass jar. Inside, there was a transparent liquid that shone under the light. With her long, delicate fingers, she tilted the jar, letting one drop, then another, fall into the juice. Then she took a small spoon and stirred slowly, with chilling precision, as if performing a ritual. I felt the blood in my body freeze. Robert's warning echoed in my head. "Find Ethan and leave right now." I wanted to scream, run, and snatch that glass from her, but my feet seemed nailed to the floor. I unconsciously took a step back, and the heel of my shoe hit the door, producing a dry clack that broke the silence of the place. Sarah jumped and turned abruptly. Her eyes widened, horror painted on her normally perfect face. For an instant, I saw the truth. A Sarah without masks, without the disguise of elegance, but it only lasted a second. She took a deep breath, and an icy smile, sharp as a razor, appeared on her lips. She picked up the glass of orange juice and raised it toward me, as if offering it kindly. "Oh, Mom," she startled me. She said in a calm voice, although I managed to notice a slight hidden tremor. "I was going to take it to Ethan." I looked into her eyes, feeling I was facing a wild animal pretending to be harmless. I pointed at the glass, my voice hoarse with fear and rage. "What? What did you put in there?" The words came out before I could think, as if my body was acting on instinct. Sarah let out a short, shrill laugh, like the sound of glass breaking. "Just cake syrup, Mom," she replied with feigned sweetness. "The chocolate cake is a little bitter, so I added a little vanilla syrup to the orange juice so it tastes better. Don't worry," she emphasized those two words. "Don't worry." But her eyes said the opposite. They were cold as ice and seemed to say to me, "You saw it, and what are you going to do now?" I knew I could not confront her at that moment. Not there. Not while Ethan had not yet appeared. Her explanation, although it sounded logical, only confirmed my suspicions. That glass was not safe. I could not let her discover my doubts or give her time to react. "Me? I have to look for Ethan," I said with a choked voice, and ran out of the kitchen. I left Sarah there, with the deadly glass in her hand, and there was only one thought in my mind: find my grandson, now. And then, like a flash of lightning in the middle of the nightmare, I saw him. Ethan had just come out of the bathroom, his eyes sleepy, rubbing his face. When he saw me running toward him, he stood still, his mouth ajar, not understanding. I did not lose a second. I knelt down and hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of his body in my arms. "We're going home right now, Ethan," I whispered quickly, trying not to let him notice the panic in my voice. Ethan looked at me with his big eyes full of confusion. "But Grandma, the party," he began to say, but I did not let him finish. With a strength I did not even know I had, I lifted him into my arms, although my legs were trembling from age and tension. Ethan, scared, wrapped his arms around my neck, and his plastic dinosaur scraped my shoulder hard. I had barely reached the main foyer when I heard Sarah's voice from the kitchen. "Mom, where are you going? The party isn't over yet." Her tone no longer had a trace of sweetness. Now it sounded threatening, without masks. My heart pounded, but I did not turn around. I just ran. I pushed the main door and stumbled out into the fresh night air in Beverly Hills. The wind made me shiver, but not from the cold, but from the fear that was gripping my chest. The heavy iron gate loomed in front of me. I put Ethan down on the ground, and using both hands, I pulled the latch, my heart pounding so hard it seemed to want to jump out of my chest. The dry sound of the metal unlocking resonated like a final point for our escape. "Grandma, Aunt Sarah," Ethan murmured, but I squeezed his hand and pulled him with me toward the empty street. The streets were silent, illuminated only by the dim yellow light of the old lampposts. There was not a single taxi. I looked around, desperate, and then Sarah's voice sounded again, closer, sharper. "Mom, stop right now!" she screamed, with a fury that sounded like a cornered animal. I squeezed Ethan's hand, and we ran along the sidewalk. My legs hurt, but I did not dare to stop. "Run with me, son," I whispered, my voice breathless. Despite the fear, the boy kept running, staggering with his little feet on the pavement. Just then, at the end of the street, 2 bright headlights approached. A taxi! I waved my arms like crazy, almost throwing myself into the road to stop it. The driver slammed on the brakes, his irritated face peering out from behind the windshield. "What's wrong with you, lady?" he shouted. But I did not care. I opened the back door, pushed Ethan inside, and climbed in after him, almost falling onto the seat. "Go, please, fast!" I begged, gasping. The driver threw me a look in the rearview mirror, but stepped on the accelerator. The car had barely moved a few feet when I looked back through the window. Sarah had reached the gate, with no trace of elegance left. She stood there, her eyes shining under the streetlight, as if she wanted to pierce the car, taking us away with her gaze. But then, behind us, a sharp sound broke the night. A siren. I turned my head and felt my stomach drop to the floor. 3 police cars, with blue and red lights flashing, were approaching at full speed. One stopped in front of Henry's house gate. The other 2 crossed the street, forcing our taxi to stop. The driver swore and looked at me furiously. "What mess have you gotten me into, lady?" I did not answer. I just hugged Ethan tightly, feeling his small body tremble in my arms. "Grandma, the police," he whispered, his voice trembling. The door of the front police car opened. The one who got out was not an unknown officer in an impeccable uniform. It was Henry, my older son. He was wearing the rescue team uniform covered in mud, as if he had come from a battlefield. His face was pale, his eyes red from exhaustion and tension. When he saw Ethan and me inside the taxi, his legs almost gave way. He held onto the car to keep from falling. "Mom, Ethan," he murmured, his voice broken by relief. I had never seen Henry like this, as if the weight of the world had just fallen off his shoulders. A tall police officer, with a badge that read Officer Miller, approached and gently knocked on the window. "Mrs. Clark, please calm down. You and the boy are safe," he said in a serious and reassuring voice. But I was still trembling, not from cold, but from the fear still running through my veins. I opened the door and got out of the car, not letting go of Ethan. The boy clung to me. His plastic dinosaur fell onto the seat, but he did not even bother to pick it up. Henry ran toward us and hugged us tightly. "Thank God you're okay," he said through tears, squeezing us as if afraid we would disappear again. "What's going on, son?" I asked, my voice broken, almost unable to control it. "How did you know?" I looked into Henry's eyes, seeking answers to everything that had just happened. The glass of orange juice, Sarah's cold look, and Robert's desperate call. Henry took a deep breath, as if he needed to gather all his strength to tell a story that he knew would tear my soul apart. He began to speak in a choked voice, as if every word had to fight to come out. A few hours earlier, while he was in a disaster relief zone for the California wildfire victims, where the phone signal was unstable, Henry had called Sarah to check on her. The call lasted only a few sentences, and then it cut off. He thought it had ended, but it had not. On the other end of the line, Sarah also thought the call had been interrupted. But the microphone was still active, and Henry accidentally overheard a conversation between her and a close friend. Sarah's poisonous words resonated through the phone, speaking of the envy she had been harboring in her heart, of how Marissa and Ethan had taken all the family's attention away from her. And then he heard something horrifying. "Just a little. No one will suspect anything. They'll think it was a sudden allergic reaction to something at the party." Henry said he was paralyzed. In the middle of that deserted area, with no signal, no way to contact the city police, he ran desperately looking for a place with coverage. He crossed roads full of mud, under the furious wind of the wildfire, just to make one call. To Robert. He screamed a warning before his phone completely died. "Mom, I did not know Sarah had gone this far," Henry said, his voice broken and his eyes red. "I thought she was just jealous, sad. I never imagined she was capable of something like this." I stood there hugging Ethan, feeling my heart break into pieces. The suspicions, the bad feelings I had had all that time, Sarah's cold look, the gesture of contempt, the strange juice glass, were not imaginations. They were real, a horrible truth that I did not want to accept. I looked at Henry, saw the pain in his eyes, and knew he was as devastated as I was. Not only had he lost the woman he loved, but he had to face the fact that she had planned to harm her own nephew. While Henry was speaking, a group of police officers burst into the house. The sound of their firm footsteps and serious voices echoed inside. Minutes later, Officer Miller came out, followed by another agent holding a transparent evidence bag. Inside was the glass of orange juice with the paper umbrella and a small, unlabeled glass jar, the same one I had seen when Sarah poured the liquid. I felt the blood freeze in my veins, but at the same time, a strange sense of relief washed over me. Ethan had not drunk that glass. He was safe. Then they brought Sarah out. She was no longer the radiant queen of the party. Her hairstyle was undone, her makeup smeared with tears of rage. Her hands were handcuffed behind her back, but her gaze was still cold, full of hatred. Seeing me, she struggled with the police officer and shouted, not at Henry or the agents, but at me. "It's all your fault!" she shrieked, with a voice so sharp it seemed to break the night. "I wasn't going to kill anyone. I just wanted justice. It was always Robert and his son. And me? And Henry? Do we not exist to you?" Sarah's poisonous words were like knives stabbing into my heart. I stood there paralyzed, feeling the whole world collapsing. I wanted to scream, to tell her that I never tried to abandon her, that I only wanted the family to be at peace, but I could not utter a word. I just held Ethan tightly against my chest, hiding his face in my shoulder, so he would not see Justice take his aunt away into the darkness. "Don't look, son," I whispered in a trembling voice. "Grandma is here with you." The following days passed as if I were trapped in a thick fog. Robert and Marissa returned that same night. When the door opened, Marissa ran toward me without saying a single word. She just hugged Ethan and me tightly. She was trembling, and her tears soaked my shoulder. "Mom, thank you," she murmured between sobs, as if trying to restrain herself from completely breaking down. Ethan, still drowsy and confused, nestled against his mother, strongly hugging his small plastic dinosaur. I stroked her hair, holding back my own tears. "I'm here, daughter," I told her, although deep down I knew that none of us would ever be the same. My house became the epicenter of a storm. The police arrived the next morning with their questions and notebooks. I sat down at the dining room table and recounted everything in detail, my voice trembling, but trying to maintain clarity. From the glass of orange juice that Ethan rejected, Robert's desperate call, to the terrifying moment in the kitchen when I saw Sarah pour an unknown liquid into the glass. Every word that came out of my mouth was like a stab, painful, but necessary. Officer Miller took notes carefully. His gaze showed empathy, although he remained firm. "You did the right thing, Mrs. Clark," he told me at the end. "Thanks to you, the boy is safe." But those words of comfort could not calm the pain I carried inside. I was on the verge of losing my grandson. Marissa, after the initial shock, acted with a determination I had never seen in her. She reviewed all the old messages on her phone and found some that Sarah had sent her. "You got another award at the company, right? A married woman with so much success. Be careful that your husband feels lonely," said one, with that sarcastic tone disguised as kindness. Another message was even colder. "Ethan looks more and more like Robert. Henry, on the other hand, has no one to look like." Marissa handed them over to the police, her face pale, but her gaze firm. "I never imagined she hated us so much," she told me later, her voice broken. I could only take her hand, not knowing what to say to alleviate her pain. Robert also found a recording of Henry's last voice message. Although it only lasted a few seconds, his desperate scream, "Sarah! Ethan! Danger!" was clearly audible, enough to strengthen the evidence. I listened to that recording several times, and every time I heard his voice, I felt my heart being squeezed. I could not imagine what my son must have felt upon discovering that his wife had tried to harm his own nephew. Henry stayed at my house a few days after all that. He lost so much weight he looked like a different person. His sunken eyes revealed a deep emptiness, as if he had lost a part of himself. He spoke little and spent hours sitting silently in the corner of the living room, looking out the window at the geranium pots that were wilting from lack of care. I knew his soul was shattered. Henry was always an idealist, dedicated to helping others, but now he had to face the reality that the woman he loved had tried to hurt his own family. "Mom," he said one night in a hoarse voice, "what did I do wrong for her to turn into this?" I hugged him without answering, because I knew that no word could alleviate that pain. One afternoon, while I was preparing tea in the kitchen, the house phone rang. An unknown voice, who introduced himself as Sarah's lawyer, asked me if I would agree to receive a call from her from the detention center. I hesitated. I squeezed the receiver hard. A part of me wanted to refuse. I wanted to let everything related to Sarah sink into oblivion, but another part, deep within me, wanted to hear what she had to say. I wanted to understand why. "All right," I replied, my voice dry. When Sarah's voice was heard on the other end of the line, it was no longer the sweet, perfect voice of the daughter-in-law I once admired. It was broken, choked with sobs. "Mom," she called me, and I could feel the desperation in every syllable. "I'm listening," I replied, in a colder tone than I imagined, as if my heart had built a wall to protect itself. "I'm sorry," Sarah began through tears. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I don't hate you. I really don't hate you." She cried inconsolably, and her crying reminded me of the nights when I myself cried over the death of my husband. But then she continued, I just hated the life they had. Every time the family got together, all eyes went to Marissa, to Ethan. Everyone said she was so capable, that he was so smart, and me, I was just an expensive ornament next to Henry. No one saw me. I remained silent, listening to her. The anger inside me began to dissipate, replaced by a profound sadness. I understood what it was like to feel abandoned, to feel invisible. I had also experienced it when my children grew up, when this house became too big and too empty. But I could not forgive her. Sarah, I said, in a calm but firm voice, feeling abandoned is an enormous pain. I understand it. But no one gives you the right to use your pain to destroy the happiness of others, much less to harm an innocent child like Ethan. On the other side, only her muffled crying was heard. I did not say anything else. I hung up carefully, feeling that I had just let go of a great weight. The trial was held a few weeks later. With my testimony, Henry's, Marissa's messages, and the result of the poison analysis in the orange juice, Sarah was convicted of attempted murder. The day of the sentencing, I did not go to the courthouse. I stayed home, hugging Ethan while reading him the story of the little lost dinosaur. His crystal-clear laughter filled the room when I imitated the dinosaur's voice, but inside me, the pain was still there. I had protected Ethan, but I knew my family would never be the same. Summer arrived, bringing the first warm rays after the storm. The geraniums on the porch of my house in Boston bloomed again, their red flowers reminding me that life, however wounded it may be, always seeks a way to get back up. The little house that was once the center of chaos began to recover its calm. I stayed on the porch, watering the pots, feeling the water seep into the earth, and I knew, deep down, that my family was also finding its way to heal. Robert and Marissa decided to move into a house just a few streets from mine. They said they wanted Ethan to be close to his grandmother, so the boy could come whenever he wanted. Marissa, with her sweet but firm smile, now usually stops by my house after work, bringing a bag of fresh fruit or a small box of homemade apple pie. We sit on the porch, drinking chamomile tea, talking about unimportant things, work, the weather, or small plans for the future. "Mom, next week I want to take Ethan to the zoo," she told me once, her eyes shining. "He loves dinosaurs. I'm sure he'll be fascinated." I smiled and nodded, but deep down, I still felt a small scar every time I thought about what had happened. Marissa seemed to understand it. She took my hand, saying nothing, just transmitting a little of her warmth to me. Henry, my older son, filed for divorce. I know it was not an easy decision. Every weekend he drives to my house, bringing with him a calm that he did not have before. He is no longer dejected as in the first days after everything happened, but his eyes still hold a deep sadness. I see him find solace in physical labor, repairing the wooden fence that was already wobbly, pruning the dry branches in the garden, or cleaning the old window frames. Once I found him sitting on the garden bench, silently watching Robert teach Ethan how to kick the ball. A sad but serene smile appeared on his lips. "Mom," he said when I brought him a glass of lemonade, "I just want everything to go back to how it was before." I put my hand on his shoulder, saying nothing, because I knew that, as before, now was an impossible luxury. One Sunday afternoon, the whole family gathered again in my usual kitchen. The aroma of the herbed roast chicken filled the house, but the atmosphere was no longer the same as in the dinners before. There was no longer carefree laughter or meaningless jokes. Instead, there was a new, deeper bond, forged through pain. Marissa was next to me, helping me season the soup. Suddenly, she wrapped her arms around me from behind and rested her head on my shoulder. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered in a trembling voice. "Thank you for being there, for saving Ethan." I stopped stirring the spoon, put my hand over hers, and felt the warmth she transmitted to me. "I'm your mother," I replied softly. But inside I knew that this moment had changed everything for us. Ethan, after so many nights waking up from nightmares, had recovered his pure smile. He ran through the garden chasing a yellow butterfly, and his laughter sounded like bells under the afternoon sun. I watched him with a heart full of love, but also with a slight pain. He was too small to understand everything that had happened, but I knew that deep in his innocent soul, he already perceived the fragility of the world. Suddenly, Ethan stopped, ran toward me, and lifted his serious gaze, an uncommon expression in a 5-year-old. "Grandma," he asked in his clear little voice, "what is a family?" My grandson's innocent question left me speechless. I looked at Ethan, then at my 2 sons talking next to the table, Robert, with his usual optimistic smile, and Henry, with his eyes still sad but slowly lighting up. I looked at Marissa, my daughter-in-law, who had faced the storms with me and was now smiling at me from the kitchen while wiping her hands on the apron. All of them, those who were on the verge of being lost and fought to stay together, were the clearest answer of all. I knelt down to Ethan's eye level and gently stroked his curly hair. I smiled, a smile that was born from the deepest part of my heart, although my eyes were already moist. "Family is not always perfect, son," I told him in a sweet but firm voice. "Sometimes family makes you feel sad, it hurts you, but family are the people who, no matter what happens, are willing to risk everything to protect each other, like your mom, your uncles, and your grandma." Ethan nodded, as if he understood, although I knew he would need time to truly feel the weight of those words. He hugged my neck tightly, and I hugged him with the same strength, feeling the warmth of his small body in my arms. Under the golden light of the sunset, I looked at my family, those who had been hurt, those who had almost lost each other, and I knew we were slowly healing. The deep crack that Sarah left would never completely disappear, but it had taught us to value each other more, to love each other more deeply. I stood up, took Ethan's hand, and led him back to the garden, where Robert and Henry were laughing. Their laughter was proof that my family, although not perfect, was still the only thing I would be willing to give everything for. 10 years have passed since that night. The small garden in front of my house in Boston is greener than ever. The pots of red geraniums and the lilac lavender bushes bloom thanks to the care of Ethan and his skillful hands. He is now 15 years old, almost my height, with the same clear eyes as before, only he has learned to keep his thoughts to himself. Life seemed to have returned to calm until this morning, when I received a letter. The envelope was light yellow, with no return address. The handwriting on the cover made my heart shrink. Round even, too familiar. Sarah Harris. I stood motionless for a long time in front of the old wooden table, my trembling fingers touching those letters. 10 years have passed, and now she was coming back. In the letter, Sarah wrote, "I do not expect you to forgive me. I just want to apologize before I leave the United States. I have changed. Prison taught me many things, not with words, but with silence. I am no longer angry with anyone, only with myself. If you allow me, I would like to see you one last time, to say goodbye." I read and reread the letter, my heart heavy and at the same time light. Would this be the moment I had waited for so long, the instant to finally close what was left open in my soul? In the afternoon, as the sun was hiding behind the old houses of Boston, I heard a knock on the door. The woman in front of the gate left me speechless, Sarah. But she was no longer the arrogant and dazzling woman of the parties of yesteryear. She had short hair, with some gray strands, a thin face, tanned by the sun, her eyes without that look of arrogance, only with a serene tiredness. "Hello, Mom," she said softly, her voice trembling. I nodded and opened the door. "Come in, daughter." We sat on the porch, where the geraniums were in bloom. I prepared tea and placed a cup in front of her. The aroma of chamomile spread, bringing back memories of so many past afternoons. Sarah held the cup with both hands, looking down. "During these 10 years I have thought a lot about you," she began, her voice choked. "At first I hated you. I thought you had made everyone turn away from me. But then I understood that I was the one who chose that path. No one pushed me." She looked up, and tears ran down her cheeks. "I am sorry. For everything. For having made you suffer. For having put Ethan in danger. If I could go back, I would prefer to disappear before doing that." I remained silent. The wind blew, bringing with it the perfume of gardenia. In my eyes, Sarah was no longer the guilty daughter-in-law, but a woman who had gone through hell, only to learn again what it meant to be human. I told her in a low voice, "Sarah, I cannot forget what happened, but I do not want to live the rest of my life with resentment. I forgive, not because you deserve it, but because I need to be at peace." She bowed her head, her shoulders trembling. "Thank you, Mom. I do not dare to ask to stay. I will leave, maybe to Colorado, to start over. I learned to make pottery in prison. Maybe this time I will create something that does not cause pain to anyone." I looked at her hands, thin, weathered, but full of life, and nodded gently. "Go, Sarah. Live with dignity. I wish you find what you lost." Sarah stood up and bowed deeply. When she turned around, the light of the sunset illuminated her short hair, giving it a silver and tender glow. Perhaps, in some way, she had truly been reborn. That night I stayed alone on the porch, listening to the ticking of the clock and the rustling of the maple leaves in the yard. In the silent house, I felt an enormous, but light, emptiness. Forgiving does not erase the past, it just makes the wound stop bleeding. I looked up at the family photo on the wall. Robert, Marissa, Henry, and Ethan, all smiling. In a corner of the frame was still Sarah, in that emerald green dress, the radiant smile of a past still clean. I did not remove that photo. Perhaps true forgiveness begins when one can look back without fear. I sighed and murmured to myself, "Go in peace, Sarah." After everything that happened, I understood that life not only teaches us to love, but also tests us with the deepest wounds. I have seen how jealousy can turn a person into a stranger, and also how love can save a family from the abyss. I learned that sometimes what keeps us together is not blood, but compassion. Family is not always perfect. There are misunderstandings, hurts, even betrayals. But in those dark moments is when we truly see who remains by our side. I want everyone to remember that love does not need to be shown. It is enough to be present when it is most needed. Because sometimes a hug, a glance, or a small gesture is enough to save a life and keep a home together. The story you have just heard has changed names and places to protect the identity of the people involved. We are not telling this to judge, but with the hope that someone listens and stops to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose silence to keep the peace, or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that illuminates the path of others. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. For now, on the final screen, I will leave 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I am sure they will surprise you. Thank you for having stayed with me until this moment,